All right, g'day. Welcome back to Collectivitis, podcast where we dissect the disease that is collectivism. My name's Pietro. We've got a special guest with us today, who I'll introduce in just a moment. We spoke a little bit recently about Dan Andrews resigning, and the reason that this guest is particularly interesting is because in resigning, Dan Andrews did not just resign as Premier of Victoria, but he also resigned in his seat of Mulgrave, which has triggered a by-election, which means that essentially everyone in Mulgrave is going back to the polls for what is going to be the fourth time in the last 18 months for those poor bastards, and they're going to have to cast their vote once again. So there's the usual pool of candidates, but this time in the pool of candidates, there is a Libertarian, and not only a Libertarian, there is the first candidate who's ever running under the new Libertarian Party's banner of the Libertarian Party. And we've got a chance to get to know her a little bit tonight. So without further ado, I'll welcome to the show Miss Ethelyn King. How are you, Ethelyn?
Good, thank you, Pietro. How are you?
I'm good. Always a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. Thank you for having me on. So yeah, first time to be on the podcast. I feel very honored. Thank you.
That's all good. And I mean, look, I'm as I mentioned before, I'm well aware that a lot of the people who watch this show are people who are within the party. So if this is a chance to get to know a candidate a little bit, I think that can only be a good thing. I was reflecting before that there's this interesting sort of paradigm with candidates in especially the lower house, either federally or state-wise, where if they are a Liberal, Labor, or most of the time even Greens candidate, the idea is that they show themselves and speak as little as possible, because they're just trying to, you want the voters to think of the party rather than the candidate, and vote for that, because there's that 30, 35%, 40% that'll just vote for the party because that's who they are. And all a candidate can really do in many of those cases is derail the whole operation. But completely unlike that, when there's an independent or someone from a minor party, the candidate, actually, you want to get to know the candidate because the candidate is the drawing point. So that's what we're hoping to do a little bit tonight, to get to know you, Ethelyn. So the question that I usually start with is, and I think it's quite interesting, not just as a kind of get to know you thing, but because as libertarians, the number one thing that we're all kind of doing is trying to bring more people into the libertarian movement.
Yeah.
And so I always think there's some wisdom to be learned in figuring out how other people came to the movement. So if you don't mind, I'd like to start with what's the origin story of Ethelyn, and how did she come to libertarianism in the first place?
Yeah, no, okay. All right, yeah. How did I come to libertarianism? Look, it's one of those things, right? I didn't realize I was a libertarian until, I hate to say it, guys, but until freaking COVID, I realized I was a libertarian. I was always, I guess, a bit of a swing voter, in the sense that I was economically conservative in the sense of small businesses and things like that. But I was quite left-leaning socially. So I was quite, very left in that regard. So for me, it was, who am I going to vote for? Like, what do I do? And I've had, situations where, federally, I've never voted for Labor in the state. But, I've had moments federally where I've sort of looked toward Labor and sort of like, oh, yeah, I like what they're doing. And sort of the way that I used to look at it was, Liberal would sort of save the money and they'd tighten everything, and Labor would spend it on the things that we need. So I was always sort of like, I kind of get it. I'm also a single mum. Yes.
Case in point.
Okay. Sorry, everyone. There you go. So that's sort of how I used to look at things. So for me, when I discovered libertarian ideals, I was like, there it is. Like I got my values from my dad. So my dad is, I guess, what you call a traditional conservative voter. Like he grew up on a farm. He was a banker. So he was sort of more a conservative voter, but his outlook on life was always, if they're not hurting anyone, it's none of our business. And that was his mentality. So those are the values that I grew up with. So, there were certain things, certain laws that would happen, like, if it's not harming me, people can do what they want, So I was always sort of the pro-drug, or not pro-drug, but, I was not one for banning things. I quite liked the Portugal model that they were having and treating it like a health issue. I support gay rights, gay marriage, and things like that. So I was quite left in that regard. So yeah, when I found libertarianism, I was like, that's a little from column A and a little from column B. Like, I guess the best way to describe it is through a meme, because that's my love language. And there's a meme with Bill Murray, and it's the left call me a Republican, the right call me a Democrat. Meanwhile, I just want to smoke weed and carry my gun at my gay friend's wedding. And I'm like, that's it, right? That's who we are. Well, that's how I identify politically. And so I felt that libertarian ideals and the Libertarian Party was going to be right for me.
So it sounds like, okay, you probably would have identified yourself as a libertarian even earlier, given that you thought fiscally conservative, socially, and that's, I mean, it's a bit of a generalization, but broadly libertarianism is kind of that idea there. Now called
obviously
libertarian.
Hating the nanny state, hating those sorts of things as well. So again, realizing that was a libertarian ideal, but it was more, and again, it goes back to those little things, it's like, you can't smoke here, you can't do this here, you need a permit for this and a license for that, and have you got a certificate for that? It's like, man, I'm applying for a job to be a barista. Like, why do I need a Cert 3 in coffee making?
Yeah.
So it's those sorts of things. So yeah.
What I was going to ask was, given that you probably would have, maybe you didn't necessarily hadn't come across the term, but you knew that you kind of fit into this realm here, but you hadn't come across the party, which is now called the Libertarian Party, but was called the Liberal Democrats. You hadn't come across them prior to 2020?
No, I had not. Sorry. Having a sip there.
All good. Yeah, because I think like that's I suppose one of the big advantages of COVID is that it gave some visibility to an ideology which otherwise very much lives in the backwater. And that's something that we're kind of all struggling a little bit now to make the next jump, because it was very exciting. As someone who was a libertarian prior to COVID, not necessarily involved with the party, but, knew of the party, it was a very exciting time. I mean, it was horrific, obviously. After you kind of get past that layer of the horrific, it was a very exciting time, because for the first time you could actually, have a conversation with people about, hey, I don't know that the government and everything that they do is necessarily benevolent. I don't know that they actually have the best interests of people at heart here. It seems like there's actually some other factors at play in their decision making, and you don't have to look very far to see that. And for the first time through COVID, you could sort of have these conversations. And so I thought, here it is. Here's the eruption of libertarianism that I've been waiting for my whole life. And now we see the kind of return to the status quo, and we're left wondering, how do we make that next jump? How do we've got this base of people such as yourself who have now come on board and are super dedicated, but how do we make that next jump? And I suppose that's a question you're probably posing yourself as candidate. Do you have any wisdom for us?
Don't know if you want to hear the wisdom I'm going to impart. No, but it is. And it's sort of, how do we make that leap, and again, because COVID was such a heavy time, and it was such a dark time, and it's not something that, we want to hang on to, we don't want to hold on to that and sort of just be, they're the COVID party and, that's who they are. We're more than that. And and again, that's why I'm so excited to run, that just to get the name Libertarian out there, just to tell people what we're about, because I think, again, people are going to realize that they're quite libertarian underneath. They're just, they don't realize it, or they haven't been exposed to it. They haven't seen it. They don't know what it means. And some of our messaging, or I guess some of the ideals of liberty, it can be quite vague. Less government. What does less government mean? It means, maybe if you're outside and you want to smoke a cigarette, you can smoke a cigarette because you're outside. It's not needing endless permits and green tape and bureaucracies and a tree fell on my car and I called the council and I had like the operator of trees or director of tree maintenance. Like, what?
I'm sure he gets $100,000 a year for that.
Absolutely. Don't worry. We're going to be researching that don't worry.
I'm wondering, so sort of back to getting to know you, were you a rebellious kid? I get the feeling you were a rebellious kid.
Yes and no. I'm half Filipino, so I have an Asian mum. So for anyone that has, I guess an Asian mum or has been exposed to that, you don't try to step out of line. But it was, and I don't think I would ever be disrespectful, but it was just always a little bit, I guess probably more so at school as well. It'd be more so, you need to do this, or I'm like, no, miss. I'm going to do that, miss. And, still very respectful. It's like, no, miss, no. Yeah. So, and just trying to, get away with as much as you can. So I don't think I was an outright hardcore rebellious kid, but I would push it as much as I could. Yeah.
Something interesting that I think, because I'm a teacher, right? I teach high school, and you've never seen as much libertarian instincts as you do with high school kids. They're all libertarian, like they're all questioning everything and pushing the borders and finding, there's a rule. Why is there that rule?
Why?
Well, because it's there.
Yeah.
Why do we need it then?
Yeah.
Okay, well, now I have to think about why we have this rule that I'm enforcing, and I don't know. There's almost this this notion that as you get older, the thing about maturing is coming to terms with the rules that are around you and you stop breaking them, and that's maturity. And to an extent, I mean, that's true. There is a level of maturity to understanding that there's social norms, that there's a reason to follow them. But then when you come across libertarianism, you almost have to unlearn this instinct, because you realize, hold on, there's a whole bunch of rules here that there is no point to them. And Topher Field, who we've had on the show before, he has the shirts that say good people break bad laws. Yeah. And we saw that divide. I mean, not just during COVID, but at any time there's something that comes up where there's, hey, here's this rule, here's this law. And there's the half that have accepted that maturity is just following rules. And then there's the half that have unlearnt that. And we're kind of trying to not only speak to that half, but drag the other half across. I don't know. That's just an interesting thing that I've noticed.
No, it's true. But you know what I will say? Not only would it be evident in teenagers, it's evident in little children. It's evident in toddlers and 4-year-olds. Because again, it's the why. But that doesn't make sense. But why? Why would I need to do that? Or it's like, oh, you've got to do this. And it's like, no. Like, literally, no, I'm not going to do that.
It's almost as if there's something about like being a human that has libertarianism ingrained in it.
That's
if we're being poetic about it all.
Here we go. Yeah, we're getting quite abstract now. That's actually a really good point. We are almost sort of born with those ideals and those values, and then it's society, like whether it's society, the environment, it I guess weighs you down or starts to constrict you and confine you. But it's, like when you think about, I guess, the younger mind and sort of how much more open it is. I remember seeing a study, and when they put, they had like a group of adults and then like little kindergartners, and then they gave them like, whether it was a paper clip or a piece of like just a piece of cloth, and it's like, name things that you could make out of this. And then, the adults maybe came up with like 20 things, but the kids came up with like 50 things, just because their imagination just went everywhere, because there were no limits. There was no constriction on where they could go or what they could do with it. So again, society just crushes that.
Goddamn society.
Crushes that spirit.
well, let's redirect our anger. Maybe not so much at society, but at the government that informs the way society often is built. So, what was it specifically in 2020? What was the moment, if there was a moment, or was it a culmination of like, was it a slow process? The moment where you realized this is wrong. There's more than, you know, shame on me forever voting Labor. Which now that I know this, I'll never let you forget. But
federally. I actually consider myself an old school lefty. Like I'm more an old school lefty, sort of that mild anti-authority. But yeah, I would more consider myself an old school lefty.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean as an insult. There's just as much shame in voting for Liberals. So, so was there a moment in 2020 specifically?
It was slow. It was very slow. Like at the beginning, I was, I think the first lockdown, I think when everybody had, like, was it house party or, and you could still go to Kmart, but no one went to Kmart. So it was like empty and there was no one on the road. And you're like, I can dig this. Like you go to Kmart at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, there's no one there. I was like, this is fantastic. It's like, I can't believe no one's doing this. I'm like, I'm the only one here. All the shops are open. So that was okay. And then bit by bit. And again, it's going back to when the rules are arbitrary and they don't make sense. That's when I'm like, I'm not going to do that. So it was, then do the mask. I was like, no, I'm not going to wear that. No, thank you. And I was always very polite. When someone asked me where my mask was. I was like, oh, I can't. And I would say, I can't wear one. Thank you, though. So
good answer.
Yeah. I can't.
I've got an exemption because what are they gonna, papers, please? Usually it's just some kind of good, well-meaning member of the public who, because they have this strength of, the propaganda behind them, feel that they have a right to ask you about your mask. They're not going to press you.
When you're in the majority, it's okay. It's easy to puff your chest down, and because you're with the crowd, you're with the majority. It's easy to do that. So again, that was a big thing for me, was, I guess being open about that part of myself and sort of, being like, yeah, no, I'm not going to do that. Because for a big part of, your life, or in my life anyway, it was, didn't want everyone to like me, you just want to be liked, so then to go through COVID and to go through that, and then to have that strength bit by bit to resist more and more, it was a huge character development for me as an adult. And I think I don't know where my life would be or what I'd be doing if, COVID didn't happen. Yeah. Getting a bit deep at 8:38.
Yeah, well, look, I think the thing with COVID, and I do understand the instinct of, hey, let's not dwell on the past so much, and it's time to move on and whatnot. I do think, though, that, I mean, at the core, what are we as libertarians kind of espousing? It's this idea that, less government, more freedom. But why? Because the government is not necessarily has your best interest at heart, and at some junctures does things that are objectively evil and harmful. And what better example? Like, if the people we're trying to reach don't even have the bandwidth to reach back to a lived memory that we all have with COVID, then I don't know how we're going to reach them. So I mean, there's that element, but I also think that like I libertarian as anything, but I mean, typically my instinct following rules comes pretty natural to me, right? Like if I'm playing a board game, I'm number one, the stickler for the rules is my number one. I need to know what are the parameters of how we're playing, and if anyone breaks this, then what are we doing here? Like, it's all. So the COVID thing, I remember when, there was, okay, this is an injustice, but it's the rule. Okay, you're breaking this rule now. And I found that the first couple of rules, they were tough to break, because it was like, that's that whole same idea. I want everyone to like me. I want to fit in. I want to, it's a very human need. But as you broke more of the rules and you realized, one, this feels pretty good. living by my own moral standards in a time when I think, it's difficult to do so. Like, that feels good. But as you break more rules, it became easier and easier. So
Yeah,
did you find
I
that?
found that. Yeah, I found that. It just got, it got easier over time, and you have, like less anxiety as well, because the first time, God, the first time I went to was like Woolies, I think without him, like my heart was like pounding. And I'm like, I can't believe I'm going to do this. What are they going to say? Someone going to spit on me? Like, I don't know.
Jesus. They'd have to take their mask off to spit on you, though.
Thankfully that didn't happen. But yeah, look, it did get easier over time, and then you sort of build more of I guess a resolve within yourself well over time. And back to your original question, because I segued as I always do, it was gradual, but then the big moment for me was the omnibus bill. The omnibus bill, when that happened, I was like, wow. Like, because I'm pretty sure it was the omnibus bill when it was like you couldn't talk to anyone. It was like you can't even like speak to anyone. And it was just and it was like prior to that, the having people dob your neighbors in, and being Filipino, that's how Marcos's regime started. It was neighbors, it was turning on your neighbors, it was teachers turning on the students. If a teacher would hear conversations that the students were having, they would be taught, they'd go straight to the authorities. So again, that's where you start to realize, you're like, oh my God, like this is Australia, this is Melbourne. And I often wonder, or I ponder this quite a bit. It's, again, we never thought that would happen here. And, again, being Filipino and knowing that can happen. And, people would say like, but that's the Philippines. What does that mean? Like, you don't think that government overreach and an abuse of government powers couldn't happen here? Because it's happening here. It's just, it happens slowly. And it's scary. So whether it's because I, grew up hearing stories about what had happened during Marcos's regime. There's a fantastic documentary, The Kingmaker, which is on Stan. Not that it's not a plug. Not I'm getting paid by Stan, I wish that, if I was, I'd start, like, oh, how's that old Porsche, eh? Yeah, so I would highly recommend actually watching The Kingmaker, because it's a very good documentary to see how these abusive powers can happen. And it was almost following the same thing. People couldn't gather in groups in the Philippines. The media got shut down. It was only approved media that could ask approved questions. It was people turning on people. And yeah, so the omnibus bill for me, and then and then him introducing that was huge. And that's when I was emailing MPs, being like, you can't do this, and please. So yeah, and I think it was the Darren Hinch party that responded. I think Kath responded, and obviously Tim and David. But it felt like also Tim and David's were also a bit more personal than the others. But I had already reached out to David's office prior to the omnibus bill, which is why I started emailing MPs, because it must have been a communication or something about the omnibus bill. So yeah.
So, remind me, to my shame, the omnibus bill.
Omnibus.
Jeez, I really struggled with that. The omnibus bill, that was one of the extensions of the emergency powers, wasn't it? And they threw in a whole bunch of other stuff with it.
A whole bunch of extra stuff, and it was like longer. And I think it was, it was almost, I guess, cementing. Because I don't want to say legislating, but it was almost like cementing those emergency powers. And those, the emergency powers, just, police being able to just walk into your house without a warrant, and things like that. I think, oh my God.
Yeah. And like the idea of an omnibus bill already is like, it's it's an extremely unlibertarian thing, but it's a thing that most people would kind of scoff at a little bit, even just the average person, because we see that a lot in the US. Like, there'll be an omnibus bill where The Democrats can't get need to get their extra funding in for some welfare project, and the Republicans don't want to do that, but they'll do it if you throw in some extra funding for the military. And then it ends up being this enormous, like, disgusting hegemony of a bill where at the end everyone's just like, yeah, look, we need to vote for it because otherwise our veterans won't get, their allowance and they're going to starve. And do you hate the veterans? And so everyone just pushes it through, and then you have all this other shit packed in with it, which is something that we haven't really seen in Australia. And the way they sold it is exactly the way they sell it there: is, hey, we need these emergency powers, so obviously you all have to vote with this, and don't think twice. We don't have time to think. You don't have time to read. Just go with it. This is obviously
you're going to kill Granny if you don't sign. If you don't agree to this. Do you want to kill Granny? You want to kill Granny? You're a Granny killer, like.
Yeah, exactly. And then it got pushed through. And so I think that's a I don't think we've seen too much of that even since, but that was something that in Australia veers away from, even the most statist elements of it. Let's narrow down to the present then, because I mean, all right, we'll the past is the past, as much as we need to remember it, but we should also talk about the future, because there is a lot of hope for the future. So what is it that your campaign for Mulgrave is based on? What are you running on?
Yeah, so we're running on cost of living, because that is front of mind of most people that I've spoken to. Cost of living is front of mind, and all of that entails, whether it's your groceries, whether it's the petrol, whether it's, your electricity bills. It affects it's obviously affecting everybody. So that's definitely something that we're running on. Another thing that we're running on, or that I'm running on for Mulgrave, is parental rights. Because again, that's something that no one's really talking about. And the parents they're not getting involved in they're not being included, I should say, in what's happening in the schools. And, that's with everything, it's a sense of, I always go back to this word empowerment and disempowerment. Parents aren't really given a choice, with anything. It's, oh, you want to send your kids to school? Cool. So you can either send them to the local one, depending on where you live, or if you've got lots of money, then you can choose what school. And you don't get to choose the curriculum. If you want to homeschool, it's all on you, and good luck to you. And, if you decided you wanted to, you and a few other families might want to do a little co-op. No, you can't, it's, there's just no choice. And there's nothing that is, again, empowering parents to make that choice that's going to be right for them, that's going to be right for their family. And it's so funny because, I guess society or what do it's like, oh, everyone's unique and everyone's an individual, and, you be you. Except in the education system, it is one size fits all. And if you don't fit that, too bad, so sad. It's standardized testing. It's NAPLAN testing. It's, but then at the same time, we're telling everyone that they're individuals and to embrace your uniqueness, but you're not giving me an educational environment that's going to do that. So that's what we want to do, is give parents that power to do that. So again, when we say things like parental rights, again, it's so vague and it's such a broad idea. It can be quite abstract as well in a way, freedom matters or again, parental rights. And there's that word, which rights and freedom and things like that. So if we really break it down, it's things like, when we say school choice, it's literally having a choice on where you want to send your kid to school. Are they more artistic? Maybe they'll be better suited in an artistic school. Are they better suited in, a more academia focused school? And it's interesting because the education system has not actually changed since the Industrial Revolution. And the way that schooling was created was to build factory workers. School is sort of set up like a factory. You've got the bell and, you've got set times that you do things. And, it's just very much almost a production line. And again, in school, you don't get to work together because that's cheating, right? Oh, you can't ask anybody anything, that's cheating. But then when you're a grown up, that's called collaboration, right? So it's this education system has not changed, and yet the world has changed exponentially since then, and education's not catching up to that. So if we even look at, I guess, teaching kids in about outcomes and working together, and looking at things in a different way, or how are we going to get to an outcome for this? What are some different ways that we can look at it, and having them develop those critical thinking skills, as opposed to comply, get the answer right. No, it doesn't matter how you came up with the answer. This is the answer that's in the book. This is how it's got to be done, but everybody thinks differently. As long as, it's still, 2 plus, as long as 2 plus 2 still equals 4, it doesn't matter how you got there, whether it's, 3 plus 1, whatever. Do you know what I mean? It's as long as as long as the answer is correct, it doesn't have to be done the way that they say that it has to be done. So yeah, so that's why I'm obviously very passionate about, school choice, because I think we can really just change it, And again, what do I think people should understand, I guess, about us, the Libertarian Party, or the ideals that we have? I like to think that, we could be sort of disruptors to many things, not just to politics, but again, to the education system, to the I guess, to the economics, there's just so many things that we can do that can just change the way that society is. So yeah, that's something that I want people to know about who we are and what we can offer, is that just something to just break the duopoly that we have at the moment. We've got left and we've got right. It's two wings of the same bird. Who gets shit on? We do. Yeah,
I mean, both the left and the
right.
right.
I swore on your thing, sorry.
Oh, we swear, it's all good.
Okay, cool.
Like both the left and the right are more than anything happy to employ, the force of the state, whether it's for one slightly different flavor of statism versus another slightly different flavor of statism. I suppose what we're advocating for is, the removal of that absence of choice and the returning of choice. There's something,
and that's exactly right. Oh, sorry. But that's exactly right. Liberal and Labor, or left and the right, they're arguing about which of them can control your life better, and we're saying, nah, you can control your life better. You can make the right choices for you.
Well, not just control your life better, like which of them can control your life and everyone else's life, regardless of whether they agree with them or not. Like, that's even more absurd. If you want your life to be controlled, sure, whatever, so be it for you. But who are you to say that everyone else is the same, the same cookie cutter solution?
Exactly.
What I was going to say with education is something that I think is devoid of the way that education is looked at now. Is, okay, education, we talk about rights. So, there's a libertarian idea of like negative rights, and then the positive rights are extra things which the government decides are rights, and therefore if they're rights, they must be paid for by the taxpayer and all the rest of it. And because education is seen as this right, it's no longer seen as a product, or like something, and that parents and students by extension aren't seen as customers.
Yes.
Even though they all pay for it, like everyone pays for education without a choice through taxes or inflation eventually. But school choice, part of it returns this idea of the customer. Like, okay,
that's exactly right. Yeah,
it's a halfway measure, because it doesn't, you're still paying taxes and then you get the voucher rather than a complete market measure. But it's returning to this idea, okay, what do you want to purchase?
Yeah, and that's right. So how we would want to do it is because at the moment, the schools themselves are funded. But what we would do is actually fund the student, so the funds would go directly to the student. And again, the parent would decide what school is going to be best for them. And as you say, it will hopefully incentivize schools to be the best that they can be, so that they can have the student enroll with them. Because at the moment, it's just a given. we're just going to have people enroll because they live here and they have to. Where else are they going to go? So giving parents that option and that choice to decide is going to, incentivize schools to be their best, leading back to the free market principle. So, yeah.
What's really, sorry, whenever we get onto education, I just get stuck on it because I have so
No,
much to
that's
complain about.
And see, like, I love learning, and because I learn in different ways. So traditional schooling was not for me because I'm a kinesthetic learner. And new research is showing that those things don't even matter anymore. But, the traditional learning just didn't jive with me. I learned by doing.
Well, and that's the whole point of school choice, right? Is that there would be a school for this type of learner, there'd be a school for this type of learner.
Yeah.
And if there's no market for this type of learner, then, maybe that means that no one really fits into that box kind of thing.
Or if there isn't that, then maybe an entrepreneur or somebody will have a great idea for a school,
Yes, and all of this, this entrepreneurialism is completely blocked out at the moment. But what I was going to say was, we have school choice already, but it's done through the school catchment areas. It's bizarre because we already have school choice. Like, some public schools are better than others, and everyone knows this. Like, everyone knows in their own area there's a public school which has a better reputation than another public school, even though, because of the funding and because of how standardized it all is and unionized it all is, they should be identical as far as the government and as far as the public is concerned. But so how do you choose which one you go to? Because everyone would rather go to the better public school.
Yeah.
But they already have school choice. It's just that instead of getting to choose through your voucher where you go, you have to buy a house inside the catchment area, which means that you're then maybe buying a smaller, not as nice house because it's in this particular area, which is affecting all sorts of other parts of your life, just to have this, 2-tiered or 3-tiered voucher system, which could be completely removed and would fix that altogether. So people already want school choice.
Yes.
Even your most rabid collectivist, statist lefty will still want to send their kids to the better public school. And so they already want school choice. It's just that they don't want to officialize it with something so libertarian, I suppose.
Yeah, but isn't it funny how it all ties in? Because it's like, oh, we can't just send my kid to a school. Why? Because that's what the restriction, that's what the law is. You can't. It's like, well, that doesn't make sense. Let us change that. So again, it's, all of our ideals just really tie in together. So it's just, as you say, people already want this, but again, it's bringing the knowledge to the forefront of people's minds, is that it's these restrictions or these laws or whatever you want to call it, that we can't do that. So let's disrupt it. Let's disrupt the market.
Something I wanted to ask you about, something that I would like libertarians to disrupt very much.
Yes.
Now, I don't know if you're running on this specifically. I know that it was something that the Libertarian Party ran on in the past. So the people of Mulgrave, as I mentioned earlier, have had to vote at the federal election last year, at the state election last year, at the referendum this year, and will now have to vote for Mulgrave. And I'm pretty sure Aston, which is only like a couple of roads away from Mulgrave, do they intersect at any point?
I think that they might.
So potentially people who are in both of those have had a fifth election because of the Aston by-election. So are you running on voluntary voting? Because I dare say that some people there might be pretty sick of being forced to go to the polls.
We certainly are. I got to say, Pietro, it's almost like you've got notes there on things to ask me to keep me on track. Yes, we are running on a voluntary voting platform. So, and look, going back to what you said exactly, the people in Mulgrave will have to have voted 4 times in 18 months, 2 years. And look, we have compulsory voting. And again, it doesn't really jive with the libertarian ideals. It's compulsory, and we understand, it's a right and it's a privilege to have the ability to vote, but it's also your right to choose not to. If you don't want to vote, then you shouldn't have to, and you shouldn't be threatened with a fine if you don't vote. And again, the only punishment for this is a fine. So really, if you can afford it, you can not do it. So it's again, it's if the laws, if it's only going to affect you financially, then really it's a law for wealthier people. It's fine for them. Like, yeah, no worries, that's okay. But it's not giving people a choice on what they want to do with their right. You have freedom of religion, but then you also have freedom from religion. So as somebody that is running for a lower house in parliament, we're essentially offering you freedom from politics. So
and I mean, politics has certainly become a religion to some people, or a
oh
proxy
yeah,
for religions.
and I'm sure that there are many people that don't want anything to do with politics, and look, they're going to be voting like a month out from Christmas. I'm sure most people would want to do their Christmas shopping on the 18th as instead of vote. So yeah, we are definitely advocating for voluntary voting.
So I looked up in preparation for this how much the fine was. Do you know off the top of your head how much the fine is?
$30? Is it 20?
How much, sorry?
Is it 20 or 30?
$92.
Oh,
$92 fine. Now, I don't know if that's the same for all those elections, but that's the most recent.
Yeah.
Now, like $92 is not just like, that's not just a fine to the poor, to the lowest.
Well, yeah.
Like, no one scoffs at $92. Like, that's, and imagine among 4 elections, if you really didn't want to vote, if you really didn't want to support the system that you so hate and didn't want to cast your vote in any way whatsoever, you didn't even want a donkey vote, you still have to turn up, or else it's upward of $350. Like that's insane. I've always thought that the voluntary voting is a knockout like idea. I've always thought it's one that most Australians would get behind, because Australians hate politics as kind of like an ethos.
Yeah.
And I was quite surprised. I remember talking to some people around I think it was the federal election last year, like people from all sorts of parties at one of the polling booths. And I was really surprised by how ardently some people came to the defense of a compulsory voting. It was like, well, we don't have a true democracy unless everyone's involved and that sort of thing. And it was weird because, like, I thought, hey, this is one that we can all agree on. Like, we all think that people who don't care shouldn't be forced to vote. I mean, that seems like a no-brainer. People who don't care enough to even want to turn up on one day should not have their vote counted because they're forced to. But even that was contentious. So
yeah. That's so funny. See, I had a bit of the opposite, because I'd see some people, I don't want to be there, hand out how to vote. Like, I don't want to be here, and it's like, oh, really? That's actually one of our policies. Here, why don't you take a look? We don't want you to be here against your will either. Here you go. And like, oh, that's interesting. So yeah, so I kind of had a little bit of the opposite, but I have had some friends or some people that I know that are very like, no, people have died for this, and suffragette, women's suffrage and all of that. So I totally get it, and I've always voted. So
I don't know that the suffragettes fought to force you to vote, though.
No, they just wanted the right. They just wanted the right to vote.
I don't know that anyone died to force you to vote, or
no.
else they give you a fine. Like, that's absurd.
Yeah. But so yeah.
I do have to give as a caveat, the conversations I had were at the federal election last year, where I think everyone had a lot more stamina for voting. I mean, I don't know if those same people would be saying the same thing.
Yeah, I don't know.
After being dragged out 4 or 5 times. So I did want to touch on something which I think is quite interesting before I realize we're getting sort of close to the end. So I kind of, following the state election, not talking specifically about the Libertarian Party or minor party victories here and there, but broadly looking at like Labor and how Dan Andrews won resoundingly, and Victoria turned red and turned Labor, and all of Australia turned Labor, and everywhere except for Tasmania is red, as well as federally. And this is all despite the fact that Labor is for big government spending, and big government spending is what it was causing the inflation that we saw then, and we are still seeing today. On top of all the authoritarian lockdowns where Labor or the left parties were always worse. Despite all of this, Australia voted resoundingly for Labor. And in response to that, also, the Liberals, knee-jerk reaction after losing the state election was, hey, we need to go further to the left in inner city to recapture inner cities, because otherwise we can't ever win them, which to me reeked of, okay, they've got no idea, this is all hopeless. And my prediction at that time was, okay, it looks like we've got Labor here for a while. If all the inflation and if all the lockdowns and if all the hasn't turned people off Labor, it never will. And yet, I was surprised by and I think this might be something of a turning point, or at least an opportunity, with the response to the referendum. Because the voice referendum was very much something which I think Labor championed on a point of, hey, look how resoundingly we've won everywhere. We can get anything through. Yeah. And the fact that didn't go through, and the fact that it didn't go through despite all this corporate support and all this government support and all this calling everyone against them a racist, it might have been a turning point. Now, I don't know. Would you like to weigh in on what you think is kind of what should we read into from the voice referendum?
Yeah, I think it's a mixture of all of those things. It's everyday Australians just did not want to be lectured to by corporations, by big business, by airlines, by academics, by inner city people saying, oh, this is what you've got to do, and if you don't, you're a bad person. It's like, hang on a minute. There are different, again, cost of living was front of people's mind during this time. And calling people a racist because they don't want to alter the Constitution probably did not go down well. For me, it was, the way that I looked at it was, you're asking me to change the Constitution, but you're not going to tell me what it's going to change to, or what the details are going to be. So it's almost like asking me to sign a contract without reading it. And I'm not going to do that. And you can make all the most beautiful edited videos that you want to make. It's not going to change it. And it's, they tried to get us on the emotion, and they're trying to, again, say, attack us again, or attack people that voted again with emotion. It's like, oh, it's a shame, and this is the most shameful day, and whatnot. But it's again, Australians, I was very surprised, because turns out we don't like to be lectured to, and it's I hope that it means that it will make sort of Labor, or may not change their tactic, but just try and understand that there are bigger issues for everyday Australians. And whether it's Teal's pushing, the Greens pushing, climate, this, it's, but then you don't want to talk about nuclear. You want to do all of these things, but you don't, let's talk nuclear. If you want to really talk about, cheaper energy, or for me, I mean, why I'm into the idea of nuclear is also the idea of giving choice. It's another choice for people. You might like renewables. I like the idea of nuclear. And people are like, oh, but renewables are so much cheaper. I'm like, well, they're cheaper because they're subsidized. And oh, your electric, EV vehicles, oh, it's cheaper because it's all subsidized. Like, but give us the choice on what we want to have, and not just give us one thing and say, this is what it's going to be. And if you don't do it, then you're killing the planet. Or if you don't do it, then you're going to kill grandma. If you don't do it, then, you're a racist. It's like, no, just give us choices and give us options. So yeah. So
Yeah, if you don't subsidize my industry where me and all my friends will get jobs and money, then you're a racist. So
exactly. Right.
so one thing that I really want to ask you is, there is in the insular world of people who are so interested in politics that they follow by-elections and elections and minor parties as well, and not just Liberal and Labor and everyone who wins. So people like us, there was the suggestion that, so Ian Cook, if anyone who knows Ian Cook, the Independent, who is running against is a big sort of anti-corruption ticket, especially targeted towards Daniel Andrews at the time, but now he's also running again for Mulgrave. And I've heard some people suggest that, you know, to ensure that Ian Cook has the best chance at potentially winning, that people such as the Libertarian Party and other minor parties who are sort of fringe and freedom based shouldn't be running. Now, what would you say to that assertion there?
Yeah, look, I totally understand that, and I have huge respect for Ian Cook, and we supported him last year, and really supported his campaign and what he was standing for, and he's a lovely man, and would support, so it's it's not as if I like to think that we're running on different things. He's very much about that anti-corruption, and that's very much what he's going against, and it's almost, I guess, personal, I guess you could say, with regard to particularly with the Dandenong Council mayor and also another councillor, and the situation that's going on there. So I feel like that's very personal for him, and that's what he's going to be running on. But us as the Libertarian, we're disruptors. We're here to disrupt the education system, disrupt compulsory voting, disrupt the way that people are having to deal with their cost of living, because through the energy prices. And so if we can, I think we're running on two different things, and thinking back to Spike Cohen, I want to think of us as happy warriors. We're running on a platform of, we can make change, and not to make it sound too soundbitey or too, cringy, but it's about hope. It's about change. It's changing things. It's, not, I'm feeling a bit Javier, but it's not like a revolution. It's not like we're going to take a chainsaw, but it's changing it up, and it's letting people know that somebody that is truly passionate is running, and it's quite similar to Ian in the sense we're not career politicians, and this is, again, big respect to Ian, because he's doing this out of the passion of his heart, and what the change that he wants to see, and the change that he wants to see is we're obviously anti-corruption, but it's the change that we want to see, it's going to entail so many more things than just anti-corruption and that side of it, and it's giving people the opportunity to understand our ideals and understand who we are and what we stand for and our principles. And you touched on it earlier about the Liberal Party sort of leaning more left. We stand on our principles, and that's something that I'm proud of, and why I joined the Liberal Democrats, and why I've been able to be vocal about where I stand on things, because I can fall back on the principle of it. I can fall back on the principle of the party. We don't chop and change to get votes, or what's trendy, or what's what's going to make us look good to the younger voters, how it's not about that. It's principles, and these principles have not changed throughout time. We're pro free speech, because throughout history, the ones censoring speech have not been the good guys. The ones fighting for liberty have not been the bad guys. And these are the things that we stand on. So it's something that I'm proud of, and it's something that I want people to see and to be exposed to, because again, I think a lot of people are libertarian underneath, and I'd certainly like to think or like to hope that people are principled, you know. And if that's one thing that everyone can agree on, is that we have principles and we live our life by those principles, you know. And again, your principles might be slightly different to mine, but I think the values would always be there. And that's the beauty of being in the Libertarian Party as well, is that whilst we all might identify as libertarians, we might all be very different. You know, we've got, you know, conservative libertarians, or, you know, ANCAPs, or, you know, we've got all sorts, and we all have respectful debates, and, you know, we can all bring different ideas to the table. So yeah, that's, in a very long-winded way, why, you know, we are running in this seat. And it's, I'm, you know, I'm really proud, and I'm really, like, I'm exceptionally humbled that I was chosen to do this, to be the first person to, you know, run with the party. And, you know, it's got, you know, I was chosen not for any other reason other than being the right person, you know. And it's not like, you know, and it's not a gender thing, it's not a quota thing, it's and again,
Which you would have that question if you were in another party. Like if you're running for another party, that would be, you know, am I here because they needed a mother to,
I'm a single,
a young mother to fit the demographic, because there's a whole group of young mothers here whose vote we're trying to take.
I'm a single mom. I'm a single mother, and I'm a woman of color to boot. You know, geez, you know, the left should love me.
I'm surprised the Greens didn't snap you up, to be honest.
I probably should have dropped woman of color in my email to the Greens about the omnibus bill. Maybe that would have gotten me some traction.
Maybe they deign to reply to you.
Yeah. But, you know, again, sorry, just to touch on Ian, like, big respect to Ian. And, you know, it's, yeah, we're not, it's, there's no hostility or animosity there. Again, it's different things. We're running on different platforms. And yeah, there's nothing but respect there. And
yeah, I look, I agree with you completely there. I would like to add that I suppose when I did see these comments, I was kind of a little bit taken aback, because again, I was involved a little bit with campaigning last year, but we keep coming into the same sort of brick wall where people don't, the average person, because they're so disinterested in voting, doesn't understand how the preferential voting system works. That you can vote for Ian Cook, or you can vote for the Libertarian Party, and your vote goes to whichever one of those two ends up being in the majority and competing for the seat, if either of them end up competing for the seat. So there's no way that you couldn't, you know, completely vote for both of them effectively in the end. And the other thing that you said, which I think is true, is that so yeah, Ian is kind of this he's a reminder. He ran the first time, and it was almost like a repudiation of everything that Dan Andrews was, because he had this real hatred of Brett Sutton, and it was kind of leached. He wasn't, I don't think he was specifically talking against the lockdowns, but like, he was a small business owner, so it kind of was implied that he'd also suffered from this. So it was a very anti-Dan message. It was a very anti-Dan, anti-Labor, anger, vitriol. This is a way that you can unleash it in your vote, which I think is important, that we don't end up being that. As you mentioned, Spike Cohen, when he came to Australia, that was his big message. It was, you know, be the happy warriors.
Warrior, right? Because it's, we have so much more to offer than just being, you know, the ones that are, you know, you go, oh, you guys oppose lockdowns, or you guys oppose this. You know, we're so much more than that. And again, it's letting people understand why we were like that. You know, why? Because it's the principle of, you know, you have to give people the freedom to work, to earn a living. That's their privilege. You know, if people have the ability to work, they should be able to. And if they want to, we can't take that away from them. And, you know, we're seeing it with the COVID levy, you know, with businesses that are getting punished by having to pay a levy for, and now that, they have to pay a tax to make up for the debt that we're in, when they were closed against their will. So it's, you know, not only did the government shut you down, now they're making you pay a tax to make up for it. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just,
I like when digging just below the surface of that, the locking you down, absolutely destroying the value of the dollar, then blaming it on foreign wars as if like Putin invading Ukraine is why we have this inflation, and then taxing you and on top of everything to try and like reverse the damage that they did out of things that they benefited.
But it was for us. It was to save us,
And arguably, I would say, not arguably, but some people, let's call it arguably to not cause controversy, arguably completely unnecessarily. Like the lockdowns had no benefit whatsoever.
No.
And anyway, I mean,
but yeah, but and again, but it goes back to that principle, like we're not just, shit kickers that are just like, oh, whatever they're going, we're just going to oppose it, because that's us, it was the principle of it, it's the principle of bodily autonomy, y'all want to say my body, my choice, mandates, and you can't, like they couldn't. So again, so at the time it wasn't popular, but it was the principled thing to do. And that's something that, again, we can back ourselves on, it's not bowing to that pressure of, but it might cost you votes, or, do you know how bad that's going to make you look? Like, no, because it's the right thing to do. So yeah, it's crazy time. But sorry, yeah. So we're happy, we're happy warriors, and we're principled warriors, and it's just allowing people to see that and to maybe have it resonate, I guess, or just I want people to know that there's something for everybody in a libertarian ideal. There's something for everybody, and I think that's the beauty of it. It's it's not hurting anyone. It's not about, if everyone's consenting adults and there's no harm being done, it's none of our business. And it's, yeah, like people say, oh, why are you doing this? And it's like that Jordan Peterson thing, where he's like, oh, make your bed, because you do these big things where you speak up, and you run in politics, you run in a federal election, a state election, and now a by-election. It's like, why are you doing this? You have little kids, you got young kids, and make your bed, as Jordan Peterson would say. And it's like, well, yeah, I do want to make my bed. I do got to focus on this, but it's like, it's hard to make my bed when I have the government kicking down my bedroom door, so I can't make my bed if they're banging on my door. Like, I got to stop that, and then I can do this. So yeah, it's crazy.
Well,
time.
I mean, look, crazy times, and I'm certain that the next couple of weeks are certainly going to be nothing but heating up for you as you march on the campaign trail to take Dan's former seat. We are past the hour mark, so I did want to wrap it up.
So sorry. No, I'm so sorry.
No, it's all good. Is there any last thought that you'd like to leave us? I'll put up all the links to anywhere that people can find or support you in the description.
Thank you.
Was there any last thought that you wanted to leave our viewers with?
No, I just hope that, we get more people to see the libertarian ideals, to see that within themselves, to see that all of these big things that can happen can all start from really small things, or all of the little small inconveniences, like can't do this here, can't do that there, can turn into big things if we're not careful. But it's, there's a little bit of libertarian, I think, that everybody has within them, that ideal, as we said at the beginning, it's probably something we're all born with. So it's just finding that again,
unstamping it out, taking it,
exactly,
reversing the damage.
All
right, well, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us, Ethelyn. It's been an absolute pleasure. For those who don't already, you can follow us on Spotify, YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter. we will catch you next time, and all the best in the upcoming election.
Thank you very much. Thanks so much for having me.
Pleasure.